Hey Mixer, Graham here from therecordingrevolution.com. And this is a series that's going to show you all the basics of how to mix a song using a variety of Waves plugins. And in this video in particular, we are looking at the drums, how to make them pop in your mix. And I'm going to zero in on the kick, snare, and toms today. Take a listen to what I've got going on with the drums with some processing, and then I'll take them away so you can hear what the drums really sound like. That's what we started with, the raw drums, and here's where we took them. Bigger, larger than life, more oomph. What are we doing here? There's a couple things I want to zero in on for you today. First, let's look at the kick drum. By itself, this is what it sounded like. Decent inside kick mic, but it doesn't have the bottom end or the roundness that's larger than life that I'm looking for. So today I'm using the Renaissance EQ. Here's the EQ6. And this is a great EQ to sculpt the sound the way you want. And visually, you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm doing 4 specific moves. 2 boosts, 2 cuts. The boosts are a little bit more obvious here. I've got a big boost at 53 hertz. Okay, about 6 dB boost here. That's really the weight of the kick drum, okay? So what I want to do is turn all these off so you can hear one by one what I'm doing here. There's the weight that the kick drum needed, right? Probably was too far into the kick drum. If it was backed out a bit, it might have gotten more of that low end. Then the other boost is up top here, and that is right around 6K. And that's giving me more of the beater or the snap. So take a listen to what that does when I bring it in. That's the nice clarity we like to hear on the top of the kick drum. This sounds good to us, but it also is strategic. It allows the kick drum to cut through better on small speakers. Think your iPhone, laptop, etc. Now I've also got 2 cuts here, and these are harder to notice as a cut, but I'm reducing frequencies that aren't needed. So what I want to do is turn them on and show you what they were. This is a cut at 167. It's about a 7 dB cut. Take a listen to what it sounds like as a boost, and you can see why I cut it. There's a weird hollow ringing there that doesn't sound good. Something doesn't work in that room. So I noticed that as a nasty place, and I cut it out about 7 dB just to really clean up the kick drum, make sure that none of that is rumbling around in there. And then the other cut is right here at around 450, and I took about 7 dB out of that. Take a listen to what that sounds like. Just kind of a pointless, cheap sounding frequency. So I took some of that out, about 7 dB. And together, these 4 moves, 2 boosts, 2 cuts, make a huge difference. Massive. Now on the snare drum, there's a top snare and a bottom snare, but let's zero in on the top snare. Here's what it sounded like by itself. It sounds kind of small and thin, and there's lots of the ambience of the bleed of the hi-hat, the kick drum crashes, stuff like that. So I use the trusty old SSL E-channel because it's kind of a Swiss Army knife plugin. It does a lot of different things in one plugin, which is great when you want to save time. The first thing I used was a gate. Now, a gate simply can mute sound in between the hit you want to hear. So it allows me to hear the snare, but nothing else. All right, so let me turn on just the, let's see, I'll bypass the EQ and I'll turn on just the dynamics. This will turn on the gate as well as some compression, okay? Take a listen. There you go, much cleaner and a little bit more smack because of the compressor. But now I want you to hear what the EQ is doing. Now, on the EQ side of things, I've done quite a few moves. I've done a boost down here at around 200 hertz, and I've done a 9 dB boost as a bell curve. This is going to bring the weight that I feel like this snare drum is lacking. I've also done a cut at around 700, so taking out some nastiness there. And then a little bit of a boost at 6K. It's going to give me the crack of the snare. And then another boost at 8K. This is a shelf. This is going to give me the air of the snare. I've also done two filters. I've rolled off low end up to 100 hertz because the snare drum doesn't need that rumble. And I've also done a low pass, which rolls off the top end, everything above 10K, which is kind of in conflict with a little bit with this shelf here, but this gives me a little bit more of that 8, 9K, and this makes sure that the ultra, ultra highs are rolled off because I don't need that in the snare. So take a listen to what the EQ does. Very drastic, right? Much more fuller, much more hyped in a good way, I think. So let's bypass all of that. All 6 EQ moves, the gating and the compression. You'll hear where we came from originally. Amazing, right? What I want to show you also now are the toms. The toms I felt like were a real weak point in this song. I felt like they were very, very thin sounding. So let's go to a section with lots of toms. Total mess, very thin, very flappy. So we had to do a little bit of work. I used the SSLG channel on these to bring in some EQ, fatten them up a little bit in the low end, reduce some of that 500 nastiness that doesn't sound too good on most drums. A little bit of clarity here at 3.5K, a little bit of a high pass filter, lots of compression, and this is helping the toms out a little bit. Already an improvement there, have more attack and a little bit more weight. But then what I wanted to do was grab something that made it fatter, and here's the One Knob Fatter plugin in the One Knob series, and literally these plugins couldn't be easier. You just dial up the one knob and it gives you more of what it's called. And this worked really well on the tom, so I brought this up to about 4.5. Same thing on the floor tom. So take a listen to what happens when I turn these on. Much, much fatter, right? Literally. So when I bypass the EQ, compression, and the one knob fatter, the toms really kind of fall apart. Kind of night and day. And the last thing I want to show you on the drums is a very, very famous technique called parallel compression or New York style compression. And this is sort of the secret sauce to getting that final weight on your drum kit. The key here is to simply take a copy of the elements like your kick, your snare, maybe your toms through a send. In this case, I'm using sends here in Pro Tools. You can do this in any DAW. I'm making them pre-fader, which all that means is that if I happen to mute the kick drum track here, it won't mute the send. So it'll always send a full copy. And what I'm doing is sending a copy of my kick, snare, and toms over to a new group track called P Drums. And on this track, I've got our trusty Master Bus compressor from the SSL series. This is one of the best sounding compressors on a drum bus I've ever heard because it gives you snap and punch in a very, very musical way. And what I love is one of the presets here. It's called the pumping preset. It's literally right here when you load it up. And it gives you a very, very slow attack, very fast release, very high ratio. And all you have to do is dial in the threshold till you hear it smacking nicely. And this will give you an overly compressed sound. Take a listen to this. Right, just very smacky and it's just a little too much. But we dial that down in the mix and blend it in with the regular drums here, and it really adds some weight. What I'm gonna do is mute the parallel drums track, play you all the drums, and then I'm gonna bring in the parallel compressed drums alongside and listen to what happens on the kick and the snare especially. There you have it, massive weight. So you can see what we did with just the Renaissance EQ, the SSL EQ, some fatter one knob, and then just some compression on a parallel channel. We took the drums from not sounding very great to having way more impact and weight. That's it for this video. On the next one, I'm gonna show you how to fatten up a thin sounding DI bass quickly and easy with just a couple of plugins.